Could you tell us then, what do you think we should be doing now to sort ourselves out?
Well, I think that one can claim to have an open system answer to this. When I think we should put our act together. Put our act together in the sense that both the fiscal and the monetary policies must be working, and they must work in the same direction. Two, I think we need to cut our appetite for imported materials. It's been said that we import virtually everything in this country. And when we have a situation of this, what do? You tighten your belt. Some things, those things that used to be available easily, they're not going to be available. What are the alternatives? Can they be produced locally? If they can be produced locally, let's work on that. Diversification of the economy, we have been talking about it since I started working in my working life, even before then, that this economy must be diversified. And I do recall very clearly, and one of the things that I told people is that in 1971, my father, as a produce buyer, was employing at least 100 people during Christmas to process, to grade cocoa. 100 people, drivers, food makers, the farmers, everybody. Today, I was at home in December this year. Not a single person is in that store. Why? Because cocoa production had completely disappeared. My father alone was able to produce 100 tons, grade 100 tons. But today, there's not a single grain in our place. The store is overgrown with weeds.
We don't have
One, the agricultural policy had changed considerably. At that time, we used to have the marketing board. The marketing boards were cancelled. Therefore, there was no agency to ensure the quality of the cocoa. Payment to the farmers
It's
changed.
not as if we don't have the farmers. They're there. Now,
That's
let's go back to the
policy.
The policy, and even the financial sector. The finance sector, let's see what the banks even did to helping some of these farmers. Yes. Perhaps some of them needed some kind of boosts or loan from, then we had development banks and agric banks.
Right.
And how did they all disappear to the extent that the farmers were left helpless?
No, I think at that time, there was a lot of discipline in the financial sector.
Discipline.
Why do I say discipline? I cannot imagine today the federal government say all accounts must come through the TSA. Why should the central bank now have to penalize some banks that refuse to comply? That's discipline. There's no discipline in the financial sector. We cannot have institutional non-compliance, and yet you expect things to go on. So I think the issue of discipline within the financial sector must be addressed. The central bank gives instructions or advice or whatever it is. This is where we should comply. We have to comply.
Because as a regulator, the CBN, for instance...
Yes, this regulatory authority maybe is not using the stick enough.
But again, you made mention of the traveler's check.
Yes.
For a lot of people, they only heard about the traveler's check by reading up their books of economics or accounting. How did the CBN gradually, phased out, so to speak now, traveler's check to the extent that everyone and anyone who needs to travel would need raw cash sometimes?
Well, this is part of the questions which you ask the central bank, because I don't believe they should have phased out, the traveler's checks. If you have the advantages of the traveler's checks over cash is so numerous that you don't need to phase out the traveler's checks. And if you
that didn't help the naira, did it?
It didn't. Of course, it did not, because it means that the cash, which is fungible, can be, once you get it out, it can be easy for you to use it for purposes that has not been requested. And if you don't get traveler's checks from Bureau de Change, you get your traveler's checks from your banks. So, which means some of the functions which they have given to the Bureau de Change, as far as I'm concerned, actually belongs to the banks. And the banks have branches more than the individual Bureau de Change. When you talk about a Bureau de Change, they don't have branches beyond where they are, individual. But the banks have a system. Each bank is an organization, it's an institution. It has all the systems that can be put in place to ensure that whoever gets the money has the documentation and is recorded. But overnight, you go to a Bureau de Change, you put your money there, you give them the dollar, and they give you the naira. Where they sold the naira, it's a different problem. Nobody ever has asked, how does the Bureau de Change mobilize this huge amount of naira, which they have? They are not a depositing institution.
The agricultural policy, you said it has changed. Should the product marketing or the boards that used to be, the agricultural boards that used to be, should they be returned?
Sorry?
Because the farmers, Sulai
Yes.
made a statement, said the farmers are still there. There are still a lot of farmers, at least. Some will say that about 70% of Nigerians in the rural areas are farmers.
Yeah.
So they are still coming up with products. But the product waste because there's no market, seeming market, or the process of transporting the product from one point to the other is not there. But the purchasing, there used to be boards in those days that come to buy these products of them and store or sell as the case may be. Should the boards be restored?
Well, in my own personal opinion, I think the boards should come back. Because the boards were not only ensuring the quality of the products that have to be exported, but at the same time they are providing backstopping services to the farmers by way of seasonal loans, by way of materials. For example, I remember in those days the farmers used to have seedlings. They used to have the pesticide to ensure that their products don't go bad. Of course, the cooperatives which we had at that time were also supportive of the farmers. So I think all this have to come back. The Ministry of Agriculture will have to come back with the strong support for the farmers. Apart from financing which is coming from the banks at that time.
About the just before I wrap up, the monetary fiscal policies as well as the ones you spoke about. At the moment, is there any monetary, is there any fiscal policy that you've seen and you think, well, this should help us or it should correlate with the monetary policy?
Well, I think, first of all, when you look at the budget not being in place, it means a lot. It means a lot because the budget contains virtually all the measures that must be taken to ensure the direction of the economy, the implementation. For example, when you say, we have 30% deficit, it means measures must be put in place to ensure that we either attain, not go beyond that 30%, or reduce it. If by March you have not started, then I think it's going to be continuous, cumulative effect on the lapses which we have.
Yeah, the question I was trying to ask at that time was, yes, the budget has not been passed, but it will be.
Yes.
And then when it is, are you optimistic that we will go beyond the challenge of implementation? And if we do, is it going to improve the economy in any way?
Well, I think what will happen is that gradually as you implement it, then things will begin to improve. I am not saying that the situation today is going to remain. Once we start implementing the budget, we find things improving. People will have access to resources which they will be able to do. Then those on education, will now be able to do that. The farmers, we also have an opportunity of going back, to their business. I think it's important that this economy have to move forward.
Yeah, but what would you say to those who say, well, yes, we've heard the CBN in terms of their monetary and forex policies,
Yes.
but where are the fiscal policies?
That's Ministry of Finance. That's not the responsibility of central bank. The fiscal policy is from the finance angle.
Yeah, people say that seems to be missing.
Yeah, that's what I feel, that there's a disconnect between our fiscal policies and our monetary policies, and that they have to go hand in hand. So I'm sure the Minister of Finance knows what he's supposed to do, and the economic team is supposed to be in place to ensure that the coordination between the two, must be in place.
Before we let you off, what would you love to see in the economic team? We're talking about the composition. Would you love to see just finance eggheads, or also some big players in the industry, like big entrepreneurs?
Well, I think the question of whether the private sector should be in the economic team or not, to me, is not an issue. As long as you have a sounding board, that the private sector, you have a sounding board with the private sector, and they don't have to be or necessarily be in the policy making. But we will sound them, they will talk to them, we'll get information from them. But I think the responsibility belongs to the government economic team, and that necessarily does not have to include the private sector. But the private sector will be carried along. It will be a sounding board on the major issues they want to undertake.
All right, Mr. Olabisi Ogunjobi, OON, is the immediate past chairman, board of directors, Federal Mortgage Bank. Is also a former researcher with the CBN and an economist. Thank you for coming on this morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, then let's flip over and have a look at the headlines again with Anne Nwawodo.